7 rules that will transform your life in 1 week. Studies show that 85% of people feel stuck in their lives. 67% wake up dreading the day ahead. But Jordan Peterson discovered something remarkable. There are 7 specific actions that can rewire your brain for success in just 1 week. The science behind this will blow your mind. Dr. Jordan Peterson, clinical psychologist and professor at the University of Toronto, has spent over 3 decades studying human behavior, chaos theory, and the psychology of meaning. What he discovered challenges everything we think we know about transformation and success. You see, most people believe that changing your life takes months or even years. They think you need massive overhauls, expensive courses, or some kind of magical breakthrough, but Peterson's research reveals something different, something that the self-help industry doesn't want you to know. The human brain is designed for rapid adaptation. When you apply the right psychological principles in the correct sequence, your neural pathways can literally rewire themselves in just 7 days. This isn't motivational fluff. This is hard science backed by decades of research in neuroscience, behavioral psychology, and cognitive therapy. Today, I'm going to share with you Peterson's 7 rules that have transformed millions of lives around the world. These aren't just theories from a textbook. These are battle-tested principles that work whether you're a CEO, a student, or someone who feels completely lost in life. But here's the catch. You must apply them in order, and you must apply them completely. Half measures get half results. Are you ready to commit to 7 days that could change the rest of your life? Rule 1. Stand up straight with your shoulders. Dr. Peterson's first rule isn't just about posture. It's about rewiring your brain's perception of yourself and your place in the world. You see, humans share something fundamental with lobsters. We both organize ourselves into dominance hierarchies. When a lobster wins a fight, its brain releases serotonin, making it stand taller, appear larger, and become more confident. When it loses, serotonin drops, causing it to slouch, withdraw, and become submissive. The fascinating part, this exact same mechanism operates in human beings. Studies conducted at Harvard Business School found that people who adopted powerful postures for just 2 minutes experienced a 20% increase in testosterone and a 25% decrease in cortisol, the stress hormone. But Peterson takes this further. He discovered that your physical posture literally sends signals to your brain about who you are and what you're capable of. When you slouch, your brain interprets this as defeat. When you stand tall, your brain prepares for victory. But why does this work so powerfully? The answer lies in what neuroscientists call embodied cognition. Your body and mind are not separate entities, they're parts of one integrated system. Every physical position you take sends biochemical signals that affect your thoughts, emotions, and decision-making processes. Research from Columbia University found that people who maintained upright postures showed increased activity in the prefrontal cortex, the brain region responsible for executive function, decision-making, and self-control. They also demonstrated improved working memory and reduced anxiety levels. Here's what you need to do starting today. Day 1 implementation. Set 5 random alarms throughout the day. When the alarm goes off, immediately check your posture. Stand up straight, pull your shoulders back, lift your chin, take 3 deep breaths in this position and notice how your thoughts change. The transformation begins immediately. Within hours, you'll notice your confidence increasing. Within days, other people will start treating you differently. Why? Because dominance hierarchies are real, and when you signal strength, the world responds accordingly. But this isn't just about appearing confident, it's about becoming confident. Your brain doesn't distinguish between real confidence and physiologically induced confidence. When you stand like a winner, your brain starts producing the neurochemistry of a winner. Peterson warns that most people sabotage themselves before they even begin. They think, this is stupid or this won't work for me. But consider this, if something as simple as posture can trigger measurable changes in your brain chemistry, what are you losing by not trying? The lobster analogy goes deeper than most people realize. In Peterson's research, he found that when lobsters are given serotonin, they begin to behave more aggressively and confidently, even if they've previously been defeated. The neurochemical change literally transforms their behavior and their position in the social hierarchy. The same principle applies to humans. When you consistently maintain upright, confident posture, you're essentially giving yourself a natural serotonin boost. This doesn't just make you feel better. It changes how you think, how you make decisions, and how others perceive and respond to you. But here's the crucial insight that Peterson emphasizes. This isn't about fake confidence or putting on an act. It's about aligning your physical presence with your potential. When you stand up straight, you're not pretending to be confident. You're allowing your natural confidence to emerge. Rule 2. Treat yourself like someone you are responsible for helping. This rule exposes one of the most destructive patterns in human psychology. We treat ourselves worse than we would treat anyone else. Peterson discovered this while analyzing a startling statistic. People are more likely to fill their dog's prescription than their own. Think about that for a moment. We'll move heaven and earth to help our pets, our friends, our family members. But when it comes to ourselves, we make excuses, we procrastinate, we settle for less. Why does this happen? Peterson's research reveals that deep down, most people don't believe they deserve good things. This isn't conscious, it's a psychological pattern developed in childhood and reinforced by years of self-criticism and societal conditioning. The neurological impact is devastating. When you consistently treat yourself poorly, your brain literally develops pathways that expect failure, disappointment, and pain. You become addicted to your own suffering because it's familiar, and the brain values familiarity over happiness. But here's the breakthrough. You can reverse this pattern in just one day by consciously changing how you relate to yourself. Dr. Kristen Neff's research at the University of Texas found that people who practice self-compassion have lower levels of anxiety and depression, better emotional resilience, and higher motivation to improve their lives. But Peterson goes deeper. He argues that treating yourself poorly isn't just harmful to you, it's harmful to everyone around you. When you're operating from a place of self-neglect and self-hatred, you can't possibly contribute your best to the world. Think about it this way. If you were responsible for helping someone become the best version of themselves, would you let them stay up until 3 a.m. scrolling social media? Would you let them eat junk food for every meal? Would you let them skip exercise for months at a time? Would you let them stay in toxic relationships or dead-end jobs? Of course not. So why do you allow this for yourself? Day 2 implementation. Ask yourself, what would I do if I were helping my best friend in this situation? Then do exactly that for yourself when making decisions. Pretend you're advising someone you deeply care about. Notice how different your choices become the moment you start treating yourself like someone worthy of care and respect. Everything changes. Your standards rise. Your choices improve, your life transforms. But this requires a fundamental shift in identity. You must stop seeing yourself as someone who deserves punishment and start seeing yourself as someone who deserves help, growth, and success. Peterson's clinical work reveals that this shift often happens through what he calls taking responsibility for your own life as if it matters. This means recognizing that your well-being affects not just you, but everyone in your sphere of influence. When you take care of yourself properly, you model healthy behavior for others. When you set high standards for yourself, you inspire others to do the same. When you treat yourself with respect, you teach others how to treat you. The psychological research on self-compassion shows that people who treat themselves kindly are actually more motivated to improve, not less. Contrary to the belief that self-criticism is necessary for growth, studies show that self-compassion leads to greater resilience, better performance, and more sustainable change. But this isn't about being soft on yourself or making excuses. For poor behavior, true self-compassion means holding yourself accountable while treating yourself with the same kindness you would show a good friend who is struggling. Rule 3. Make friends with people who want the best for you. Peterson discovered something that will shock you about human relationships. Most people are surrounded by individuals who actively sabotage their success, not intentionally, but consistently. Research from Harvard's Grant study, which followed subjects for over 80 years, found that the quality of our relationships is the strongest predictor of life satisfaction and success. But here's what they don't tell you. Toxic relationships don't just make you unhappy, they literally rewire your brain for failure. When you spend time with people who complain constantly, make excuses, or discourage your growth, your mirror neurons start copying their patterns. You begin to think like them, act like them, and ultimately become like them. Peterson's clinical experience revealed a disturbing truth. Many people maintain relationships with individuals who secretly want them to fail. Why? Because if you succeed, it highlights their own failures. If you grow, it exposes their stagnation. This isn't about being cruel or judgmental. It's about understanding human psychology. People who are stuck in their own lives often feel threatened by others' growth. They may not consciously wish you harm, but they unconsciously undermine your progress to protect their own ego. Day 3 implementation. List the 5 people you spend the most time with. Ask honestly, do they celebrate your victories or minimize them? Do they encourage your growth or make excuses for why you can't change? Do they inspire you to be better or enable your worst habits? The neuroscience is clear. You become the average of the people you spend time with. This isn't metaphorical. It's biological. Your brain patterns, your thought processes, even your neural pathways begin to mirror those of your social circle. Dr. Nicholas Christakis at Harvard found that behaviors and attitudes spread through social networks like viruses. If your friend gains weight, you're 57% more likely to gain weight. If your friend quits smoking, you're 36% more likely to quit smoking. If your friend is happy, you're 15% more likely to be happy. But here's the part that most people resist. Sometimes you need to distance yourself from people you care about if they're holding you back. This doesn't mean you hate them or wish them harm. It means you refuse to let their limitations become your limitations. Peterson emphasizes that. This rule isn't about being elitist or abandoning people in need. It's about recognizing the difference between someone who wants to grow but needs support and someone who actively resists growth and tries to pull you down with them. Look for people who celebrate your victories genuinely without jealousy, or competition challenge you to become better rather than enabling your weaknesses. Support your goals even when they don't understand them. Take responsibility for their own lives instead of blaming others. Inspire you to reach higher rather than settling for mediocrity. When you surround yourself with people who want the best for you, something remarkable happens. Your standards automatically rise because you're constantly exposed to higher expectations. Your possibilities expand because you see others achieving what you thought was impossible. Your growth accelerates because you're in an environment that rewards progress. But this requires courage. It requires you to value your future more than your comfort. It requires you to choose growth over familiarity. Are you willing to make that choice? The research on peer influence shows that we underestimate how much our relationships affect us. We like to think we're independent thinkers, but the reality is that we're constantly influenced by the people around us. The key is to make this influence work for you rather than against you. Rule 4. Compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today. Social media has created the most toxic comparison culture in human history. Instagram feeds, LinkedIn updates, Facebook highlights, everywhere you look, someone appears to be living a better life than you. Peterson's research reveals that comparison is the fastest way to destroy your motivation and sabotage your progress. When you compare your behind-the-scenes reality to someone else's highlight reel, you're setting yourself up for misery. But The problem goes deeper than social media. The human brain is wired to make comparisons as a survival mechanism. In prehistoric times, knowing your relative position in the tribe could mean the difference between life and death. Today, this same mechanism is being hijacked by a world of infinite comparisons. There will always be someone richer, more successful, more attractive, or more talented than you. If your happiness depends on being the best at everything, you're guaranteed to be miserable. Day for implementation. Write down where you were exactly 1 year ago. Identify 3 specific areas where you've improved. Set daily micro goals that represent 1% improvement. Track your progress against yesterday's version of yourself. The Stanford Research Institute found that people who focus on personal growth rather than social comparison show significantly higher levels of life satisfaction and achievement. But Peterson discovered something even more profound. When you compare yourself to others, you're comparing your unique path to someone else's unique path. This is not only unfair, it's impossible. You don't know their starting point, their struggles, their resources, or their circumstances. But when you compare yourself to who you were yesterday, you're measuring real progress on your actual journey. This creates what psychologists call intrinsic motivation, the most powerful and sustainable form of motivation known to science. Here's the key insight: small, consistent improvements compound over time. If you improve by just 1% every day for a year, you'll be 37 times better by the end. This isn't theory, this is mathematics. Peterson's clinical work shows that people who adopt this mindset experience reduced anxiety and depression because they're not constantly measuring themselves against others, increased motivation and persistence because they see daily progress, better goal achievement because they focus on process over outcomes, higher self-esteem because they celebrate small wins, more resilience during setbacks because they maintain perspective. But this requires a fundamental shift in perspective. You must stop looking sideways at what others are doing and start looking forward at where you're going. The comparison trap is particularly dangerous because it's based on incomplete information. When you see someone's success, you're seeing the end result, not the years of struggle, failure, and sacrifice that led to it. You're comparing your beginning to their middle or end. Peterson emphasizes that everyone is on a different timeline. Some people find their calling early, others later in life. Some have natural advantages, others have to work harder. Some have supportive environments, others face obstacles you can't imagine. The only fair comparison is with your past self, because that's the only person who started with your exact circumstances, limitations, and potential. But this doesn't mean you can't learn from others or be inspired by their achievements. The key is to use others' success as proof of what's possible, not as a standard for measuring your worth. When you focus on personal progress rather than relative position, something remarkable happens. You start celebrating small wins instead of dismissing them. You become more resilient because setbacks don't threaten your identity. You develop genuine confidence because it's based on real progress, not artificial comparisons. Rule 5. Do not let your children do anything that makes you dislike them at first glance. This rule might seem to apply only to parents, but Peterson's deeper meaning revolutionizes how we think about boundaries, standards, and respect in all relationships. The principle extends far beyond parenting. It's about not tolerating behavior from anyone, including yourself, that creates resentment, disrespect, or toxicity. When you allow people to treat you poorly, you don't just harm yourself, you harm them by enabling their worst impulses. Peterson discovered this while working with families in crisis. He noticed that parents who set clear, consistent boundaries raised children who were not only better behaved but also happier and more confident. Children whose parents failed to set boundaries often became anxious, insecure, and difficult to be around. But why does this happen? The answer lies in what psychologists call secure attachment theory. Children and adults actually crave structure and boundaries because they provide safety and predictability. When there are no limits, people become anxious because they don't know what's expected of them. Day 5 implementation. Identify one behavior you tolerate from others that creates resentment. Set a clear, non-negotiable boundary. Communicate this boundary respectfully but firmly. Follow through consistently, regardless of pushback. The psychology behind this is profound. When you allow others to behave in ways that make you dislike them, you're teaching them that this behavior is acceptable. You're also training yourself to accept disrespect, which erodes your self-worth and confidence. Research from UCLA shows that people who maintain healthy boundaries report higher levels of self-esteem, better relationships, and greater life satisfaction. But most people struggle with boundaries because they confuse kindness with enabling. True kindness sometimes means saying no. True compassion sometimes requires setting limits. True love sometimes demands consequences. Peterson's clinical experience reveals that people who fail to set boundaries often feel resentful and angry because their needs aren't being met. Attract people who take advantage of them because they signal that it's acceptable. Struggle with low self-esteem because they don't value themselves enough to demand respect. Have difficulty achieving their goals because they're constantly managing other people's problems. Experience chronic stress and anxiety because they never feel safe or respected. But when you establish clear standards for how you will and won't be treated, something remarkable happens. You start attracting people who respect you. You eliminate toxic relationships because toxic people can't function in healthy environments. You model healthy behavior for others. This doesn't mean being cruel or unreasonable. It means having enough respect for yourself and others to maintain standards that create mutual respect and healthy interaction. The neuroscience of boundaries shows that when we consistently enforce healthy limits, our brains develop stronger neural pathways associated with self-respect and confidence. We literally train our nervous system to expect respectful treatment. But setting boundaries requires courage because some people will push back. They may get angry, make you feel guilty, or try to manipulate you into backing down. This is normal and expected. People who benefit from your lack of boundaries won't support your decision to establish them. Peterson emphasizes that the people who truly care about you will respect your boundaries. Those who don't respect your boundaries don't truly care about you. They care about what they can get from you. The long-term benefits of this rule extend far beyond individual relationships. When you model healthy boundaries, you teach others how to establish their own. When you refuse to tolerate disrespectful behavior, you create a culture of mutual respect wherever you go. Rule 6. Set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. This rule exposes one of the most common forms of self-deception, focusing on external problems while ignoring internal chaos. Peterson discovered that people who constantly complain about politics, society, or other people's behavior often have their own lives in complete disorder. It's psychologically easier to point fingers at the world's problems than to take responsibility for your own problems. But this pattern is not just unproductive, it's destructive to your mental health and personal growth. When you focus on things outside your control, you develop what psychologists call learned helplessness. You train your brain to believe that you're powerless to change your circumstances. This creates anxiety, depression, and chronic dissatisfaction. Day 6 implementation. Spend 2 hours organizing your physical space. Identify 3 personal problems you've been avoiding. Create action plans to address these problems. Stop consuming negative news and social media for the entire day. The neuroscience behind this rule is fascinating. Studies from Princeton found that physical clutter in your environment competes for your attention, decreases performance, and increases cortisol levels. But Peterson goes deeper. He argues that your external environment reflects your internal state. When your room is chaos, your mind is chaos. When your relationships are toxic, your self-worth is toxic. When your habits are destructive, your future is destructive, but the reverse is also true. When you create order in your physical space, you create order in your mental space. When you fix problems in your immediate environment, you develop the skills and confidence to tackle bigger challenges. Peterson's research shows that people who focus on personal responsibility before social criticism achieve their goals faster because they channel their energy into actionable areas, experience less anxiety and stress because they focus on what they can control, have better relationships because they're not constantly complaining, make more positive impact on others because they lead by example, feel more empowered and confident because they see tangible results from their efforts. This doesn't mean you should ignore injustice or avoid helping others. It means you should develop your own competence before trying to fix the world. You should clean up your own life before telling others how to live theirs. Think about it this way. If you can't manage your own bedroom, what makes you think you can manage society? If you can't maintain healthy relationships in your family, what makes you think you understand how to fix global conflicts, the psychological? Research on locus of control shows that people who focus on what they can influence are happier, more successful, and more resilient than those who focus on external factors. This isn't about being selfish, it's about being effective. When you put your own house in order, several things happen. First, you develop competence. You learn how to solve problems, make decisions, and create positive change, these skills. Then transfer to larger challenges. Second, you gain credibility. People are more likely to listen to advice from someone whose life demonstrates the principles they're teaching. Third, you model the change you want to see. Instead of complaining about what's wrong, you become an example of what's right. Peterson emphasizes that this rule isn't about perfectionism. You don't need to have a perfect life before you can help others. But you should be actively working on your own problems and taking responsibility for your own choices. The order you create doesn't have to be elaborate. Start with basic things. Make your bed, clean your room, organize your finances, repair broken relationships, develop good habits. These small acts of responsibility create momentum that extends to larger areas of your life. Rule 7. Pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient. This final rule addresses the deepest question of human existence: what makes life worth living? Peterson discovered that most people pursue what's easy, comfortable, or immediately gratifying rather than what's meaningful and fulfilling. The difference between expedient and meaningful is the difference between survival and thriving. Expedient choices solve immediate problems but create long-term suffering. Meaningful choices require short-term sacrifice but create long-term fulfillment. Research from Yale's Center for Emotional Intelligence found that people who pursue meaning report higher levels of life satisfaction, better physical health, and greater resilience during difficult times. But meaning can't be found. It must be created through conscious choice and deliberate action. Day 7 Implementation. Write down your core values and what truly matters to you. Identify one expedient habit you need to eliminate. Identify one meaningful pursuit you've been avoiding. Take the first concrete step toward the meaningful pursuit. Peterson's clinical work reveals that the pursuit of meaning often requires delaying gratification for long-term rewards, taking responsibility for others' well-being, facing uncomfortable truths about yourself and the world, making difficult sacrifices that others don't understand, standing up for principles even when it's costly. This isn't easy, but it's essential. People who pursue only what's expedient often find themselves successful but empty, wealthy but miserable, busy but unfulfilled. The neuroscience shows that meaningful activities activate the brain's reward centers more sustainably than expedient pleasures. Meaning creates what researchers call eudaimonic well-being, a deep sense of purpose and satisfaction that doesn't depend on external circumstances. But meaning is personal. What's meaningful to you might not be meaningful to someone else. Peterson emphasizes that you must discover your own meaning, not adopt someone else's definition of a meaningful life. Ask yourself, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? What problems do you want to solve? What legacy do you want to leave? What would make your suffering worthwhile? The answers to these questions point toward your unique path of meaning. But pursuing meaning requires courage, the courage to be vulnerable, to fail, to be misunderstood, to stand alone when necessary. Peterson's research shows that meaning often emerges from taking responsibility for something larger than yourself. This could be your family, your community, your work, or a cause you believe in. When you commit to something beyond your immediate comfort and pleasure, you tap into a source of motivation and resilience that can carry you through any difficulty. The pursuit of meaning also requires accepting that life involves suffering. Peterson argues that the question isn't whether you'll suffer, it's whether your suffering will be meaningful. When you pursue meaningful goals, the inevitable challenges and setbacks become worthwhile because they serve a larger purpose. The compound effect, why these 7 rules work together. Peterson's genius isn't just in identifying these individual principles, it's in understanding how they work together to create exponential change. Each rule builds on the previous ones, creating a compound effect that transforms not just your behavior, but your entire identity. When you stand up straight, Rule 1, you signal competence to yourself and others, which makes it easier to treat yourself well. Rule 2, when you treat yourself with respect, you naturally gravitate toward people who also respect you. Rule 3, when you surround yourself with supportive people, you're more motivated to focus on your own progress rather than comparing yourself to others. Rule 4, this positive momentum makes it easier to set and maintain boundaries. Rule 5, which creates the stability needed to focus on your own problems rather than criticizing others. Rule 6, finally, when your life is in order and you're surrounded by supportive relationships, you have the foundation needed to pursue meaningful goals rather than just expedient ones. Rule 7, the result, a completely transformed life that builds momentum with each passing day. But here's what Peterson discovered that will shock you. Most people will not implement these rules, even though they work. Why? Because transformation requires you to give up the familiar, even when the familiar is painful. Your brain is designed to keep you safe, not to make you happy. Change feels dangerous to your nervous system, so it will resist with every tool at its disposal: rationalization, procrastination, distraction, and self-sabotage. This is why Peterson emphasizes that implementing these rules requires courage. It requires you to value your future more than your comfort. It requires you to take responsibility instead of making excuses. Recent neuroscience research has validated Peterson's approach. Studies using brain imaging technology show that focused, consistent application of new behaviors can create measurable changes in neural pathways within days, not months or years. The key is what researchers call deliberate practice, focused, intentional repetition of specific behaviors with immediate feedback and adjustment. When you apply these 7 rules with full attention and commitment, you're essentially rewiring your brain for success. As we conclude, remember this: knowledge without action is worthless. You now know Peterson's 7 rules that can transform your life in 1 week. The question is, what will you do with this knowledge? Most people will watch this video, feel inspired for a few minutes, and then return to their old patterns. They'll make excuses about why they can't implement these rules. They'll wait for the perfect time that never comes, but you have a choice. You can be like most people, or you can be different. You can choose growth over comfort, responsibility over victimhood, meaning over mediocrity. Peterson's research shows that the people who actually implement these rules, who take action despite their fears, who persist despite setbacks, who choose growth despite discomfort, these people create lives of extraordinary fulfillment and impact. The choice is yours. Will you spend the next week making excuses, or will you spend it making changes? Your future self is watching. What will you choose? Remember, you are more capable than you know, stronger than you feel, and one decision away from a completely different life. Peterson's 7 rules aren't just suggestions, they're your roadmap to transformation. The question isn't whether these rules work, the question is whether you'll work them. Start today, start now. You're transformed. Life is waiting.